So have we reached max stack? I'm old enough to remember the days when barely there barefoot running shoes were all the rage. So it feels as if we've reached the other end of that spectrum with the current crop of max stack trainers. And what a crop it is. While max stack shoes in the past have been, in my experience at least, mildly disappointing, today's mega midsoles are far more impressive. And having tested three of the best over the last few weeks, including the Nike Vomero Plus, the ASICS Super Blast 3, and the Puma MagMax Nitro 2, did I say Mad Max? And the Puma MagMax Nitro 2, I'm actually a little bit in love with each of them, but for very different reasons. So which one is the best for you and your needs? I do have answers to that, so stick around, let's chat. Hi there, I'm Chris, dad of keen runners Ben and Sam, husband of keen runner Jenny, and a journalist who loves nothing more than cutting through the marketing hype to tell it like it really is. I'd like to get through this triple review as quickly as possible for you. So I'm first going to discuss the commonalities of these three shoes: the Nike Vomero Plus, the ASICS Super Blast 3, and the Puma MagMax Nitro 2. Then I'll go through individually what they're really good at. And then at the end I'll round things up by letting you know what differentiates these shoes and what might best suit your needs. And of course, while I have you here, Benny and I buy all of our own shoes to review on this channel. This episode cost us about $800, ouch! So if this review helps you at all, please help us out for free by clicking like and subscribing to our channel. That really helps us a lot, and we've got some fantastic stuff coming up. So let's start with the stats, and all of these, by the way, are in my US 9.5, which in each of these pairs of shoes fit perfectly true to size. First of all, the Vomero Plus has a stack of 45mm at the back and 35mm at the front for a 10mm drop, and on my dodgy kitchen scales weighs 276 grams or 9.74 ounces. The Super Blast 3 has a stack of 46.5mm at the back and 38.5mm at the front for an 8mm drop and weighs 229 grams or 8.08 ounces. And finally, the MagMax Nitro 2 has a stack of 46mm at the back, 38mm at the front for an 8mm drop and weighs 262 grams or 9.24 ounces. So in this test, the Vomero is clearly the heaviest, but that weight actually only tells a small part of the story. Once you're running, the Vomero certainly doesn't feel like a shoe that is weighing you down. More on that in a minute. And also worth mentioning is that cost-wise, the Super Blast 3 is significantly more expensive than the other two. In most markets, the MagMax Nitro 2 and the Vomero Plus are priced fairly similarly, and the Super Blast 3 is priced anywhere from 10% to 30% more than the other two shoes. Let's move on to discussing the characteristics that these shoes all share. All three of them have a generous amount of room in the toe box, particularly for my relatively chunky feet. None of them breathe very well through their very comfortable uppers, meaning each of them runs a little bit warm. In the Vomero Plus and the Super Blast, this is particularly true. Out of the three, the MagMax 2 does breathe the best, but it is still a relatively warm shoe. Each of these three shoes also has a fairly heavily structured heel cup that is generously padded and super comfortable, and each has a padded tongue, with the Vomero being the only one, interestingly, that is not gusseted. But you do not notice this when you're running or when you're putting the shoe on. It just, as you can even see here, it just stays in place. The MagMax tongue, interestingly, is bizarrely stretchy. And I've never been crazy about stretchy tongues, which is kind of a weird line to use, isn't it? You wouldn't be able to say that much outside of shoe reviewing, although I did work for Guinness World Records for many years where we did discuss stretchy tongues, so maybe there are other environments where I could say that. But as I said, I am not crazy about a stretchy tongue. This one is very, very comfortable. It doesn't upset me at all. I don't know why I'm not a fan of a stretchy tongue. And also worth mentioning, I think, is something that I always notice. The Vomero Plus out of these three shoes is the only one with a heel loop. When I'm putting on shoes, when I'm first pulling them on in the morning, I really appreciate a heel loop. And I don't like the fact that a lot of manufacturers are starting to go cheap and cut this out. So I'm really glad that Nike hasn't done that. The laces and the lacing systems are all absolutely fine. Probably the easiest one to achieve lockdown is the Super Blast 3 with its new and very fancy lacing system, but all of them are fine, all of them are comfortable, and all of them are easy to lock down. In fact, every one of these shoes is supremely comfortable in every way. When it comes to comfort and quality, I have zero complaints about these shoes. Let's bypass the midsoles for now and head straight to the outsoles. All of the outsoles provide perfectly good grip, but if there was going to be a winner, and I don't think there'll be any great surprises here, but it does go to the Puma grip. Actually, on one of the test runs that I did in this shoe, I did both of these runs in the dry, and then when I got back to the car, it was clouding over and rained quite a bit during the next part of the run. I was really happy that the Pumas were the last pair of shoes that I wore, because that part of the run I did have to increase the pace quite a bit. I did go around several corners that were covered in leaves, and also where there was shiny pavers, that sort of thing that you usually expect to slip a little bit, and the Puma grip made it feel as if I was on a perfectly dry pathway. But as I said, you're very unlikely to have any slip issues with any of these shoes. The Nike has what I'd say is overkill when it comes to outsole, and the ASICS has all the right sticky stuff in all the right positions. The one criticism I'd level here is on the Super Blast, where I have noticed that because of the relatively minimal outsole coverage, there is some wear developing on this exposed midsole. This is the sort of wear that I used to see creeping in on the Super Blast 2s at about 500 or 600 or 700 kilometers. These shoes I've done perhaps 100 kilometers in, and they're already starting to look fairly worn, which is a little bit of a concern right now. Now let's chat individually about the unique characteristics of each of these shoes. Let's start with the Super Blast 3. I was originally disappointed during my first few runs in the Super Blast 3. I'll link my original review video below. I just felt that they were less versatile than my perennial favorites, the Super Blast 2s, because they lacked the ability to up the pace, because they were a little bit too soft and too marshmallowy. A lot of people agreed, but at the same time several people came to me and said that this shoe really works for them when they pick up the pace. Then on a podcast I heard all about the wonderful Sarah from the running channel doing a marathon PB of 3 hours 29 minutes, and she wore during that marathon the Super Blast 3s. Now 3 hours 29 minutes in a marathon I think is a fantastic time for anybody, so clearly the Super Blast 3s really do work well at pace for some people. Me, not so much. I find the large, squishy slab of Leap foam, which sits above a firmer layer of Blast Plus foam, to be very squishy and marshmallowy, as I said. I have a hard time getting this shoe up to any paces, and once I'm up at that pace, I have a hard time keeping it at that pace. It tends to make me quite tired running in these shoes fast. So for me, the Super Blast has become an easy run shoe, or a recovery run shoe. And for that, it is astounding. That is because of the absolutely incredible comfort levels that it offers, and a real feeling of your foot being protected, being completely swaddled in this incredibly high quality shoe. I've also mentioned in the past that the Super Blast 3 feels a little bit too large on the foot. When you're running in it, it never really gets out of the way, and every now and then myself, my wife, and a couple of other people who've mentioned it to me have managed to kick our toe as we've brought our feet forward. Now maybe that's a problem with my running style, maybe it's not, but it doesn't happen to me in any other pair of shoes, and I'm convinced it's to do with the size of these shoes, the volume of them. That's just a very little gripe, it really is. It's not a big issue. And another thing worth mentioning is that the Super Blast 3 is the only one of these three pairs of shoes that feels unstable. Just because of this squishy Leap foam at the back under the heel, you can get a little bit of wobble every now and then as you're turning corners or hopping off curbs. At the other end of the speed spectrum, in max stack shoes at least, is the Nike Vomero Plus, which offers a firmer ride compared to the Super Blast 3 thanks to this lovely stack of ZoomX foam. The midsole of this shoe is significantly stiffer than the two others. It's not rigid like a carbon-plated shoe, but it comes much closer to that Super Blast 2 level of firmness and stiffness that provides a really responsive running base. The Vomero Plus is an easy shoe to get up to a fast pace and a really comfortable shoe to hold you at that fast pace. It has a real sense of spring and of bounce. I'll also link to my recent Vomero Plus review in the description below. I mentioned earlier that the Vomero Plus is the heaviest shoe in this test, but that it doesn't feel like it once you're running. That's because of the springy nature of the midsole. The fact that the entire midsole is helping to launch you forward on every step rather than bending into every step. In my testing at least, this means it carries a much faster pace much more easily than the Super Blast 3. And I'm also a big fan of the higher drop. While the other two shoes in this test have an 8mm drop, the Vomero Plus has a 10mm drop. Maybe I particularly like this because of my long history with Achilles problems, or maybe it's just because of my age, but I do find that that slightly higher drop really works for me. This, of course, is going to be something that's very personal to you. So where does that leave the MagMax Nitro 2 with its sure-footed grip and its incredibly wide stance? When you first put these shoes on and you look down at them, they do actually look a little bit silly because they are so wide at every point. Check this out. I did some measurements and I discovered that the midfoot point of the Evo SL Woven measures about 65mm. The same point of the Deviate Nitro Elite 4 measures about 60mm. But the midfoot point of the massive MagMax Nitro 2 measures 90mm. That's an extra 3 centimeters of width across just your midfoot. But strangely, this shoe does not feel as big or as bulky on your foot as the Super Blast 3. When you're running, the foam and its responsiveness and bounciness is somewhere between the Super Blast 3 and the Vomero Plus. It's not too squishy and it's not too firm. In fact, this might have the absolutely perfect level of squish and spring for most runners. It's very responsive, it's very happy to run fast, but it's not quite as quick to get up to pace as the Nike Vomero Plus. It is a really lovely shoe to run in. I took it out for another 12-kilometer run this morning because I just wanted a shoe that was going to move as fast as I needed to move, but be really comfortable at the same time. And so that is how I would define these three shoes, by the performance of their midsoles. That's how they really differ. In terms of comfort, they are all spectacular. In terms of quality, they are all top of the line. But in terms of the way they perform, they are all also brilliant, but in a very different way. If we put these three shoes on a comfort spectrum, they are all up there at the luxuriously comfortable end of that spectrum, with the Super Blast 3 at the very top and the MagMax 2 and Vomero Plus coming a very close equal second. If we put them on the speed spectrum, and of course none of these shoes are going to break any speed records, but if we put them on the speed capability spectrum, we would have the Vomero at the top, with the MagMax Nitro 2 coming second and the Super Blast 3 coming third. And if we put them on the versatility spectrum in terms of being able to perhaps take one of these shoes away on holiday to do every single run you needed to do, the Vomero Plus would be at the top of that scale, being able to cover more types of runs more comfortably, with the MagMax Nitro 2 a close second and the Super Blast 3 third. And don't forget, if any of this information is helpful to you, please do like and subscribe. It really does help our little channel a lot. So what are you looking for in a Max Stack shoe? Which of these three shoes would you choose, or which Max Stack shoe have you chosen and tried? I would love it if you could feedback in the comments below. I look forward to hearing from you. Next on our list of reviews is a much faster shoe that Benny and I will both be putting through its paces. Ben actually doesn't think that I'm a fast enough runner to test this shoe, and he might be right, but I'm going to give it a go anyway, because you're never too old, right? Don't forget to subscribe to Run with Benny so you don't miss out on that. Until next time, run well. We'll see you next week.